What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Patros podcast, where we are embracing healthy masculinity. As you guys know, we are going through the Man As series and have been, blessed to have some guests on that were on the actual series. And today we have a good friend of ours who has already been on the series as well with Cam. Jeff, I'm going to let you introduce him since he's your buddy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're glad to have Erik Dellenback back with us. And roles have changed, I think, since last time we chatted. So we can talk as little or as much about that as you'd like. But if you have my context, how I got to know Erik was in the governor's office in the state of Florida, in the Faith and Community Council. I don't know what the exact title was. Erik, can you help me out? Like I'm drowning.
Yeah, no, I served when I was the governor's liaison for faith and community. First one ever in the state of Florida, which was cool. And we had a council of people that we leaned on. Proverbs says, in a multitude of counselors, there is wisdom. And Jeff was part of that wisdom and on that council that we would lean on for faith and community matters. And so we had a fun thing. And then the little known piece is we went to Camp Blanding to be, just check it out and see how awesome they were. And Jeff's so doggone in shape, they're ready to have him join. They're ready to sign him up at Camp Blanding. I mean, I'll never forget that moment. And that was a first. And a lot of us on the council aren't exactly ready to join the National Guard, if you follow me.
Hey, listen, I was fired up, man. My American spirit was like just invigorated being on this base and like this, seeing all this like equipment, and I felt very American.
What'd you guys do? Like, what was the exercise?
Well, awesome. We were visiting. Who are we visiting there? Who was our guest?
Well, one of the generals that was there, or lieutenant colonel or colonel. There was a few different ones there. I don't remember who was the actual speaker, but we were talking about veteran affairs and just dealing with. Because again, one of the points was the whole reason the governor created a faith and community initiative, which again, I'll brag on him. Only 2 states in the nation had it in the executive office, and we were the first. And so he did that because he believed that the church was part of everything. And so we would do these, like, how can the church help veterans? And so we went down there, but then it ended up being like, you go down there to think you're going to care about them and care and love on them. And like, you want to ride in our Humvee? You want to be up on the gunner?
Yeah, no way.
The answer, all of it. We'll do all of it. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. So I had to check out the vehicles, and then they had some kind of I don't know, race or something, or no, it was like what does it take to? The question was, what does it take to be like, what time do you need to be on special forces or something like that? And I was like, well, hold up, challenge accepted. Like, what's the number here? And
you're too competitive.
I barely could get the flexibility and pull-ups to win my presidential fitness award when I was in high school. So I was not tempted at all, but Jeff really was. He was starting to actually talk to them about what it would be like to test for the National Guard.
What's the cutoff for joining?
Yeah, what is the date of this thing? How can I prove that I'm still a man? I have a lot of daddy issues, Erik, as you know, so always trying to prove myself. No, we had a great time on the council, and then Erik was able to come on the first Patros series, as you mentioned, talking about providers. So if you're just joining us today in the Patros podcast, we're going to be talking about man as provider with Erik and what that means in our role as a man. The series you can find at patros.us or manupandgo.org/Patros. And I would encourage you to check out the full series. You can get the questions. You can go through it with a group of men. You can go through it as yourself. You can go through it with your kid or whomever. So we created this to be a resource for the church and for men in the church. And thankful to have Erik as a part of that. Erik, I wanted to also just kind of start with that council since we got to know each other. One of the things that was really encouraging for me is it restored my faith a little bit in the political process. And I don't want to say it restored my faith in politicians necessarily, because you say that, it just sounds weird, but it restored my faith. I know, Senator Grahl and Senator, oh gosh, what's her name? But they helped with the abortion.
Sargel.
Yep, Sargel helped with the abortion ban in Florida, which is, I believe, 6 weeks, right? Do I have that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Stargel who was basically a stay-at-home mom. And someone said, you're passionate about this issue. You should run for office. And here she does. The next thing you know is like she is at least one of the key components in seeing, what we would say is a terrific win for children. that they can be born
Mm-hmm.
to be a part of this bill. So I was really encouraged by that piece of it, Erik. You're around it a lot more than I was. Maybe if you could give some insight, because I think that's an interesting piece of your story, is how all that came about and restoring, faith in believers who are in these places and leveraging that position for his kingdom.
Yeah. Wow. What a topic. You know, for people that don't know me, I came out of starting Tebow's foundation, starting Chris Tomlin's foundation. All of a sudden, I'm in government. And I'll tell you, the first few days walking around that Capitol, it felt like some old church stuff where you draw half a fish and like wait for someone to come along and draw the other half, just to know. Like there was some secret handshake to who was a Christian in the building. And I'll tell you, that was interesting because I think so many people think that if you join government, if you're a politician or you're in the executive office, or that you've got to check your faith at the door. And I would say anyone that checks their faith at the door, it's a huge mistake. Because anytime we think we can do it ourselves, I mean, again, not to fall perfectly in line with where we're going with this, right? But we remove the wisdom, counsel, and discernment of the one that actually has all wisdom, counsel, and discernment. And so I think so many people have this image of government where they're like, well, they must set that aside. It's like, no, that's the thing that, now again, we might not proselytize every minute. I might not be sharing about Jesus every minute, but it is the very core thing that affects everything I do in my day. And so what was really, really neat, and I just mean neat, is by the time we left, we started this little Bible study. There would be just a couple, and the rules were you had to be a leader, a current leader of state administration. I mean, high, like secretary or executive office. And you had to have served one of the governors. So not necessarily just DeSantis. I think I left, it was like 30 something people. And I'll bet, I'm just a guess, but 12 out of the 24 agency heads for our state were in that Bible study. Wow. And what we were studying is, what does Scripture say about government? Which, by the way, Scripture has a ton to say about government. Like, I mean, things like, I think people are always fascinated. Well, so a king orders the execution of all these children, right? Who was his counsel? Who was standing there? Have you ever been in a situation where the leader said blank and you're like, there's no chance because that doesn't align with who I am? And it became, man, our state, I've said many times now, became the most faith and community friendly state in the country. And I've quantified that in many, many different ways. But what was happening and is happening in Florida was remarkable. And Jeff referred to change. So I stepped away on May 1 of this year. And my role now is to, I've got a couple, but the one that I'll talk about most is I'm teaching 49 other states to do what Florida did. And the reason I want 49 other states, the reason that other people want 49 other states, and we've got a lot of momentum coming out of the White House. They want 49 other states to see what Florida did for two reasons. One, if you're a Christian, you believe that the church was God's plan A for serving the most vulnerable people on this planet. And so that's the core. The second thing is Florida reduced foster care by over 35%, almost 40% of kids in foster care. And it wasn't because of adoption, and it wasn't because of reunification. It was because the church learned who those kids were upstream and stepped into the role the church was always called to do. And so the funny thing about government is that when there's results, particularly financial ones that also have a positive social impact, states will listen. And so I'm getting the opportunity now to kind of preach this message of I got a report sitting right over on my office desk over there. It says that Vermont is the lowest amount of Christians of anywhere in the country, and that's still 57% of their state.
Wow.
Right? So this idea, and it goes up to brag on them for a second, I think it says Alabama is 89% report Christian, which is crazy, right?
That's wild.
And again, people debate how do they report Christian? Man, does that not tell you though that every state government should be saying, what are they? They're the largest people group in every state in the United States of America. So anyways, that was kind of the evolution for our state. It was really, really a cool period of time under super, super awesome governor who boldly said, I'll give faith a seat at the table, knowing he was going to get sued, knowing I was going to get sued, knowing everybody would be in trouble. And yet we knew it was worth it because there's 8,000 less kids in foster care right now that are home with their parents or moms that never went through the most traumatic moment of their life. Yeah. The church is pretty good at what they do.
Yeah, and we see that in the work that we do. And to just pile on, Department of Children and Families is I don't want to say they're begging, but they are going, we need help.
They're strongly encouraging.
They're strongly encouraging. I mean, they're saying we have tried to do it on our own for a while, and it hasn't worked. We need faith communities, and in particular, we need the church to step in, because to your point about the metrics, but I think that there's been there has to be a mind shift, though, because I know there had to be for me, Erik. I was very skeptical of government as well. We should be, but at some point you do have to trust somebody. And can you talk just a little bit about that? Because I'm just thinking about pastors and leaders who tend to be skeptical of government because they're like, I don't want to mess with that church state. Like, what would you say to those guys?
I was thinking that. I was like, I bet some of your listenership right now is like, oh my gosh, this church separation of church and state. Look, I don't think there was ever a thing I spoke at for 6 years where I didn't address the separation of church and state. I mean, I think the large majority of people still think it's in the Constitution. You got to get the framework that this was something written from Thomas Jefferson to the Baptist Church. And if people would just take 10 minutes, they could go online right now and read the letter. The letter is a complimentary pro-church letter that is basically saying government will stay out of the business of the church and we will not form a national church. And man, how much damage that statement has done. The interpretation of that statement shut down conversations. I'll give you two thoughts to just kick around for a while. You think about these later. But one, government and the church wake up every day thinking about and desiring to serve the same people. Like government wakes up wanting to serve the most vulnerable of our state, and church wakes up wanting to serve the most vulnerable. Now they have different methodologies. They would have different theology, but like fundamentally they wake up serving the same thing. So this vision was given to me, or image was given to me sometime early in my time there. And they said, if you really want to understand government exists between two things: the moment crisis begins and the moment crisis ends, right? So government, by nature, it's kind of why we make fun of government, by the way, is because we say all they ever do is bail the boat, which is true, because all they ever do is focus on this. There's very few moments in government where they go, why is the boat filling with water? Or maybe buy another boat. And so one of the things that I learned is, okay, so what's church's role? Well, church is, over here, it's prevention, it's love and compassion during crisis, and it's community and reunification on the other end. And so what we started doing was just starting to ask the question of, and why DCF is pleading for help is because they have a massive budget and 12,000 employees, by the way, at DCF that only can function here. Do you know how hopeless it could be if all you ever see is the moments between crisis?
Yeah.
You know how hopeless it would be to be like, they know, they're smart individuals. They know there's something upstream. They know there's something to be prevented. The secret sauce that we have as Christians is that I've got 17,000 churches, Christian churches in Florida, that every Sunday are talking about the most vulnerable, and yet they don't know how to engage. So we got one group that's talking about it, their heart's pouring out for it, they don't know how to engage. We got another group that's totally in it, they're in the darkest, deepest spots, and they don't have the resources. And so that's what, Jeff, one of the things we talked about a ton was that in Florida, and really every state, but in Florida, we don't have a resource issue, which, of course, the Christian would say, well, of course we don't. We got God with cattle on 1,000 hills, but we don't have a resource issue just with people sitting in pews, but we have a connectivity problem.
Yep.
And so much of the work that we did was literally, now there's an app on many, 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 many thousands of state workers' phones that when they're standing in a very, very bad situation, they can put on Care Portal some information about a family, and we have churches that receive that information, and in many counties, it's 17 seconds they're meeting the need. And they're keeping a family with a bed, and they're keeping that child in their biological home. And guys, do you know what's crazy? And Jeff knows this. Jeff knows I'm not that smart. I'm really simple. That's not complicated. We didn't do anything special. We just made a connection between people who already wanted to do it and people who already needed it. And so DCF, if you want to be impressed by something, is that we've had 3 amazing secretaries back to back to back at DCF. And all 3 of those secretaries would unite over the fact that they're like, nobody was created to serve the community like the church. And so if we can give the church information legally to help them know that these families exist 2 miles from their giant infrastructure, game on. And so that's it, man. It's not overly complicated, but it's beautifully strung together as God intended it to be.
That's so powerful, just because even like it just makes sense. It's a no-brainer. Like, what is the core message of this people group's existence? And the core message is care for the vulnerable. The God that they worship literally tells them, hey, you can't say that you worship me if you don't care for those in your community that are vulnerable. So then why would you not? You have a sitting army that's just a sleeping giant,
Yeah.
And to not engage them because of differences in ideology or whatever other reasons would almost be like, so we're gonna just turn a blind eye to the needs. When you have a sleeping giant that would also fund it themselves, like a lot of the times they'll fund it and the government won't even need to get involved with funding. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or
No,
yeah,
100%. I mean, look, I've said that governments across our country should be thankful and supportive of the church. I mean, we have a red phone in Florida where it's just for faith leaders to get their call into the executive office. And the reason you do that is because if they went away, the day that the church steps out of serving the most vulnerable, the system shuts down. It implodes. And so there should be an appreciation there. The second part of what you said there, which is critical, which is not only is it not a logical connection, I think it's a disservice to everybody who sits under a pastor. I mean, how many times, right? We won't make it about anyone else, right? We'll just make it about the three of us. So how many times have we sat in church, felt a deep core conviction, one that's like, Lord, I need to get home right now. I need to be on my face. I need to confess. I need to go serve. And by lunch, we've forgotten it. You know, the conviction's gone. And like, because so many times, one of the gaps has been the how, right? So the pastor preaches and convicts and holds that book up and exalts the book and then says, and in Matthew 25 it says, you need to care for the prisoner and the tired and the hungry and the lonely and and the thirsty. And it's like, but very few times are they telling you how. And so isn't it funny, as God is provider, that he would use government to be the answer to say how, right? Because by the way, government is also God's. Like it's strewn throughout Scripture. It was a system he set up, and so we've messed it up. We do that about it. We do that about everything.
yeah,
I just think the irony that government, maybe I'll end with this piece. I want to share this. So this is my own personal view. After 6 years I never had done government, and now all of a sudden I'm out. So in 3 years three things I learned: we provide money, we provide policy, and government has information. And that information is so key, because a pastor that says, I want to start a foster care ministry, and Jeff's met a ton of them, I guarantee it. And they're like, okay, great, pastor, how are you going to do that? Well, I got Susie over here in the congregation. She's a foster mom. And then I think I know this one friend over there. And they go and they do it maybe the hardest way you can get involved, which is trying to feel their way in and clunky and all that. And simultaneously, DCF has the name of 23,332 children and story, and they're standing in their home. And some of those kids came into the system because there wasn't enough beds in their home. Massive disconnect. And so I actually would go, Allan, the only thing I'd say is further that it's a disservice to the heart and motivation of the person sitting in that church to not give them the how to do it.
wow, that's good.
Yeah, it's really good. The how is always the toughest part, because to your point, Erik, we can be motivated, but without a pretty immediate application opportunity, we're not, we just, life is too busy. Something else will come up, it'll pass us by, and we have to be able to strike when the moment is there, right? Like when that spark is lit, it's like, hey, let's fan the flame. And that's been just really neat, because what I learned, serving on that council was, there are regular people in government who are just trying to do the right thing. And I really am encouraged, especially on a local level. And I think feels like the more you get to Washington, the further it strays from this. But I don't have any data. That's just kind of what I see on
Anecdotal
TV. But it's more like, gosh, these people want to do the right thing, and there need to be believers who are willing to step into those roles. I think that's what I've been really convicted of.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I've talked to a lot of people about is just because we're divided on how we would do something is not an excuse to do nothing. Right? And that's been the church government gap. I mean, real talk, right? I mean, at a very fundamental level, the church would say, I think you're allowing people to step in and foster and adopt kids that are going to families that we wouldn't consider what we view as a family, right? Well, okay, then I would encourage you to do two things. I'd say, one, why don't you think about fostering and adopting? And two, why then would you feel like that's an excuse to do nothing? Exactly. And yet somehow we've strewn together this idea that because we disagree, it's an excuse to do nothing. The other thing is that we've gone to very, very complicated, and this is the government's fault, by the way, so this is where I'll fault the government, is that we have said for many years the only thing the church can do is raise up foster and adoptive parents, is, I mean, arguably maybe the hardest thing to ask a human to do is foster.
Yes, it is.
Right. And so we're saying that's what you've got to do. And the church was like, man, and they did it, by the way. For a lot of years, they did it. And they had these disastrous situations and families that would last 6 months to a year and destroy homes at times. I mean, things were going crazy. They didn't realize you had to have wraparound care. So I think that goes back to really trying to simplify things. And there's a theme I live with. It's been the anthem of my life. I may have shared it. Actually, I don't remember if I shared that on Patros before, but I believe that there are moments in life that you see things you can't unsee. It's been the thing in my life that I'm going through life. I see something. I see a lot of things, right, that you can just let go. But every once in a while, there's one that like it just sits different, and you can't get rid of it. And what's beautiful about that is what's happening there is it's Holy Spirit conviction. You're feeling this like, and the Holy Spirit is the greatest persistent, and I hope the Holy Spirit forgives me that I say this, but I like the nag that will not let you go when you've seen something you can't unsee. Well, so we can apply that in our own life. And honestly, I would assume very much for both of you that we could have a whole podcast on those moments, right? Mm-hmm. And just talk about when I saw that, I never could forget it. And I wanted to forget it if I'm being like, but I couldn't. Well, guys, I feel like that's true of everybody, meaning that there are sometimes moments that the church just needs to see something. A pastor just needs to see something. A congregant just needs to see something that they can't unsee. Now, when I was with T-Bell, I started something called Night to Shine. It was a prom for people with special needs. The whole idea of that was not in the beginning, but became, we just want people to come face to face with people with special needs and see what happens.
Yeah.
If I'd said that first day, hey, church, would you start a special needs ministry? They'd be like, no, man, that's the second hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
And so we didn't do that. We just said, hey, I tell you what, why don't you host a prom? It's one night, no harm, no foul, big deal, right? And so they host a prom, and then I had a pastor come to me and say, you know what I hate about Night to Shine? And I was like, man, what? I've never heard that. And he's like, I hate that you put 200 kids on my doorstep on a Friday night and I've got nothing for them on Sunday. He didn't hate Night to Shine. He hated something that was in his own heart, which was that he was like, man, now I've got to do something, right? And I would say, how many ways? That's why when a family brings a bed to another family and helps that child avoid the most traumatic moment, that removal, well, that's one thing that happened. The second thing that happened is we just humanized them. It sounds to me like maybe we humanized government to Jeff, which is good too.
You
right?
did. You really did humanize government.
And so how many times? And so Jeff saw something there he can't unsee. He can't just go back home and be like, I hate government. He's like, no, because I have people that love the Lord there, and I have people I know there, I have friends there, and I've seen a human there, an image bearer there. And so anyways, I just think so much of what we're doing is trying to expose things where you're going to get the theme. Everything I can do that I can get out of the way so that God can do what he does, the better. So if I can get a person in a position where the Holy Spirit has all the day long to just convict, the person that today says, I don't want to be involved in foster care, and I say, hey, would you deliver a bed? Truth is, that chance is maybe a couple of years down the road, they are a foster parent. Yeah. But that's not because I did it. That's because that was God's plan all along. He just had to give them a bite-sized piece to begin with.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, it's so good, and just that exposure. Interestingly enough, today we've got Erik. We have DCF in the building. They're doing a site visit for our fatherhood program, and in kind of thinking about, like, you talk so much about provision there, and provision for really the least of these, and that to me is like next level provision.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. I mean, as the church, that should be like first level. It should be instinctual, like, oh yeah, Jesus tells me to do it, let me go do it. Oh, obviously there's a need here, let me meet that need. But so we should be doing that. But let me back up to like basic provision, because I know one of the scriptures in the study is in 1 Timothy 5, and talks about, you got to take care of your own, because if you do that, if you can't do that, then you're worse than an unbeliever. You had mentioned in the original video that we did, again, go check it out because it's excellent. But you talked a little bit about how being a husband, or that father figure in the house or whatever, can be a burden. Like when like in like a in a good way. It's like, man, I am burdened to care for my family, to provide for my family. Can you unpack that a little bit, like what you meant by that? Because I think that resonates with every man who's going to listen to this. Is it is a freaking burden sometimes to have to take care of my family and make sure that everything is good. Or if I got to work, take care of my employees. Or if I've got a team, take care of my team. That's a burden.
Yeah. You know, I had a moment this week. A guy had met my son, my 20-year-old son. He's a pastor, and the guy that met my son is a pastor, and he said, could we get together? And I said, sure, man. What do you want to talk about? And he's like, I want to know how to raise a boy like that. You got to know, the emotions of that were just all good. Like just.
Bro, I got choked up. Yeah, I legit got choked up when you said it.
Yeah, me too. That's why I gotta. But like, so I'm like, yeah, I would love to do that. And so we sat down for coffee a couple days ago, and of course I felt so convicted to tell him, man, I've made far more mistakes than I've done right. So let's just so that there's never this illusion of I've got this right or got that right. But he said, well, and he tried to just brush that off, and I was like, no, man, listen, 90% of how I parent is because I know all the things I did wrong and all the things I messed up, and we finally got through that. I said, man, I think so much of it comes down to intentionality. That word seems to be, I may have shared again on the last one, I don't know, but like there's never someone who's in a bad place and gets to a good place, and you're like, how'd you do that? No one ever responds with, I don't know. I just slowly faded from bad to good.
Yeah.
That term slow fade is reserved from the opposite, right? From good to
right.
bad. And so it just got me about 10 years ago, I got stuck on, well, what's the opposite? And I came up with these 3 letters, and I didn't, someone reordered them for me so I could remember them easier, but rest in peace. So radical, intentional, purposeful, RIP, radical, intentional, purposeful. I think the burden, Jeff, is that that doesn't stop, right? I mean, like I put it 2 ways. One way, in a macro level, would be we say we want to be the fish that swims upstream, particularly as Christians. We want to be countercultural. We want to look different. He says, wide is the gate and narrow is the path, right? Like, so or wide is the path and narrow is the gate. So he says those things, and we say, yes, we want to be the fish that swims upstream. And I don't know, again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating it, but I went to Alaska, I saw the fish that swim upstream, salmon swim upstream, and we could do a whole podcast on the fact that swimming upstream puts you in different danger because you've got to jump over rocks and bears eat you, and that kind of stuff's real. But there's a simpler thing there, which is at the core, a fish that swims upstream has to do one thing at all times, which is keep swimming. Because the moment the fins stop, it's now going in the way of the current, but facing backwards, and it just looks dumb. It looks like it tried to be intentional, but it didn't. It failed, and now it still looks like the rest of culture.
Well, I feel like you're describing me.
It's a ton of us, and you know why? Because we're tired. Yeah. Like as men, as husbands, as fathers, as we add those titles, by the way, the more titles we add, the more tired we are.
Yeah.
So now on a practical level, what I was explaining to this younger dad is what that might look like at night. What your keep swimming moment is when you've come home at 6 o'clock. And that particular day, he had started Bible study at 5 something in the morning and was coming home at 6 o'clock. And he's like, Erik, I just want to be on the couch. And I said, the burden is to metaphorically grab yourself by the shirt and be like, get up, bucko, because it's not over yet. You by nature of being a husband, you by nature of being a father are not able to come home and just be selfish, right? Which is in the core of us. Like I want to do it more than anybody. And yet I've said, I can't tell you how many times I've just settled into my favorite spot on the couch. I'm sitting there and I'm not even looking at anything. I'm just decompressing. And the kid comes up and says, hey, Dad, would you? Or your wife says, hey, honey, could you? Right? And the reality is in that moment, you've got this decisive moment of intentionality. Right? And I think so many things get overcomplicated, but it's like, man, if I'm going to be different, I've got to step into that moment each and every time. And I can't tell you how many times I'm literally having to like, are we kidding right now? And there's a time to rest, and I'm not knocking. God certainly has a time for rest. But I think many of us men, particularly when you come home from work, you know, the reason most men become workaholics, if we just cut the crap, is that because everything we do at work is easier than most of what we do at home.
That's right.
And so of course I want to, and of course I feel like I've earned it, and I've had 8 to 10 hour days or 12 hour days. And I'm just telling you, man, Like, I think the burden, the mantle that you wear, we talk about leadership. I had a guy early on in my life be like, leadership isn't about tugging with you. It's about arms out, protecting, chest first, chest forward, imagery of and I think all of those are burdens. I think they're beautiful burdens. I think you will, I just had I had a pastor say something that rattled me. He said, when we're born, we look like our parents. And when we die, we look like our decisions. And I just meant it. I think over and over and over about the intentionality of the burden to just get up one more time and do that thing one more time. When we have 1,000 reasons not to, is probably where I feel most about when I think of the burden of that mantle.
Yeah. We were talking in the team just now. It had come up about kind of the idea, like you can sleep when you die, you know, kind of thing, where it's just like, and I think rest is very important. I think we need to be careful as men to not put our value in our performance, right, or our usefulness, and making sure that our usefulness is based actually on our image bearerness. Like, I'm an image bearer, and so therefore I'm valuable to God. But I do think that, like, that decision that you're talking about, to, like, because I got it too, right? Hard day, kid sits down, hey, you want to go throw the ball? And you're like, you have that moment, and it's just like, I'm super tired, but what is the benefit? The return on the investment on that decision to go and throw the ball with your kid when you're dead tired may have eternal consequences. Like, it may have I'm not trying to be dramatic here. It literally could affect the eternity of this young man and or his progeny. Right? Like his kids and anybody he comes in contact with. And I'm not trying to over dramatize it for men. I'm just saying that cumulatively, if we say no to those opportunities because we're tired, we're going to get to the end of our life and we're going to be tired anyway and less impact.
Well, look, man, I mean, you're dead on the money, obviously. But how many things did we say yes to that day? I mean, you've heard the old adage, right? There's a million people that could advise the governor. There's one guy that's husband to this woman and father of these 5 kids. One guy. And so how many things did we say yes to in that day that drained us, right? We go back to high school, we had opportunity costs on everything we did, right? And this is where men have taken it so far out of line. When you talk about, rest when we die, men have so abused that thought and been like, okay, and they think then that the best belongs to the work or the achievement of money or the achievement of success, and it's like, no. As one guy said to me one time, he said, Erik, he said, you need to know if you're a 100% person, the idea of work-life balance or pace is going to be very difficult. He said 100% people run at 100% all the time. The difference is prioritizing that the things that actually matter get prioritization. Jeff, I had a epiphany one day that what you were talking about a minute ago is, do I deem time with my wife, time with my children as productive? I think men should sit on that for a second. I don't want them to answer because they'd all, if we're together in an environment like this, they'd lie. But, like, do you view that as a productive part of your day? If you laid your head down and all you did that day was spend time with your wife and kids, would you lay your head down on your pillow and call it a productive day? Because in God's economy, that's a productive day. In the average man's economy, mine, I won't speak to the average man. I'll go right to me. Boy, that was hard. It happened because my wife says to me one day, she's like, hey, you want to go for a walk? I'm like, no. She's like, well, she was pregnant, which happened a lot when we have a bunch of kids. And so he's like, well, it would help, because we're getting near the labor time. I'm like, nah. She's like, and the dog needs to go. And I was like, oh, I'll go. And I remember God used that silly little moment to be like, hey, buddy, it took you 3 things before you deemed time with your wife productive.
Wow.
And so I just think, like, again, there's so many people that could do our jobs and only one that could be the husband and father. And so I think that part should be sitting on our minds to, did we give up time for something that a million people could do and take away from time that only one could do?
So good.
Yeah.
On a similar line, because we tend to put so much value in our work, and when we tend to hear provider, we think about monetary provision. How do you keep that from being an idol? Because just what you were talking about, you want to, be productive. Like most of us men, we want to be productive, but that can, produce idols in our lives, and in particular work, and then we justify it by going, well, I'm trying to provide, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to provide here. So that's a tricky balance. What have you seen in your life to be able to sway it to the right kind of motivation?
Yeah, what I've seen in my life is that I fail far more than I succeed on that question. So thank you for that one, Jeff, because that's
Appreciate the honesty.
yeah. Look, I mean, how many years did I tell my wife I was a workaholic. I was running my marriage and family into the ground over the pursuit of things that I would then say, I'm doing this for you. I mean, how many years did I have myself convinced that all the status stuff was for my family? I mean, just silly. And at the same point in time, the family's just saying, come home, please, please, please be at home. Wow. So man, I've failed that so bad. I think one thing is, what has probably changed in our house, and a lot of it's credit to my wife, is the key providing has an eternal perspective, not a worldly perspective. And so the more, and I think this is true of so many things, right? If we can keep it that my key providing role for my family is that they end up in eternity with the Lord, standing in his presence. Like if that's my key thing, how many times, and you guys probably do this, right? You sit around with a team. I'm actually sitting with our team here shortly, and you build a strategic plan, and then you put it in a drawer and you don't run it through the strategic plan. You're just like, that was good. We had a really good working session, as opposed to, does everything filter through that strategic plan, right? And if our strategic plan is, the only thing that's going to last forever is the souls of these little kiddos that are running around my house, and this wife, and who we affected for Christ. I think the more we can lift, get the eyes up. The only antidote that I've found, because otherwise, man, I can get as wrapped as anybody around. We're an achievement success culture. Mm-hmm. Like everything. From the grades we got in school, to the prizes we got for selling magazines and chocolate bars, we have been built from day one to be an achievement-based, goal-oriented, check it off society, and so it is everything we have in us to not just fall into that culture. And again, I go back to every man that's listening, you're not going to slowly fade to intentional desires. You're going to radically, intentionally, purposely reset. And the reason radical has to be the word is because culture is going to tell you you're an idiot. Like, if you don't stay in that job or work those extra hours or go to that particular, you're going to lose momentum. You're going to give up promotions. Culture will be screaming at you and telling you that you're crazy. And I've come to believe that radical might be the only word that all Christians have to be. Because if they're not, they're looking like everything else. And so these radical, intentional, purposeful resets become a big deal for me, because every time I start to not pay attention, a pilot said, I was talking to a pilot one time, and he said that he used to fly from Atlanta to Honolulu. And I was like, man, that's got to be so tiring. And he's like, honestly, we put it on autopilot, and it does a lot of the work. And I was like, oh, so autopilot could get you from Atlanta? He said, oh, no. There always has to be a pilot awake. We do about 100 course corrections over the period of that flight because of all the conditions of weather and the things affecting the plane. Otherwise, we wouldn't even hit the islands. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's my faith journey, right? Is like as a parent, I'm like, as soon as I put things on autopilot, I will miss Honolulu. In fact, I will miss.
Hey, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like introduce that to the team, and then the little catchphrase will be, "Hey, are you on track for Honolulu or not?" And they'll be like, "No, I'm off. I'm going."
Well, I wore because of what I wore in the first one. I wanted to be very vibish for you. It's Florida, Hawaii, thin line.
Hey, we appreciate you keeping it in mind. Talk about this, and then we got to go because I know you got a meeting, and we want to respect that. You talked about this on the original Man As, but let's kind of unpack it just for a couple minutes here, which is the spiritual part of the provider. Because provision, we so much talk about it being, and then there's the family piece. And at the end of the day, I think we all would agree, like, we want our children to be productive. We want them to be good citizens. We want our wives to be fulfilled. Like, all of that is good. Yeah. Technically, you could get that without Christ. Technically, you could get that without like a spiritual, a vibrant spiritual relationship with Jesus. So many men I know are not providing in that way, or they want to and don't know how to. I know you've had your own journey. What would you say to that?
Oh man, I'd say I fell on that too. So this is good. This is a good therapy
A
session.
lot of failure right
Yeah.
now, which is good. It's good.
I built some systems in the early days with my kids where I would reward good grades, or I would reward. We had a system if you got to 18 years old without a cavity, you got $1,000. So that they were very incentivized by that. We had systems for what grading was. And one day my son said to me in college, he had done something, I can't remember what it was right this minute, where he had helped lead somebody to the Lord and something else epic. And I was coming down on him about grades. And he said, Dad, it's clear to me that all you care about is grades. I'm like, well, no, son, obviously. And he's like, and he didn't say these words, but what you reward is what you value.
Wow.
And it felt like it was an interesting moment of like, are we putting our intentionality and reward on the things that are the things we want to achieve, right? So are we, because I don't think we are. Again, I think just naturally, I'm telling you, right? I've told my kids this a lot lately. I've been like, hey, when you become a parent, you're going to find out you have no idea what you're doing. And I don't either. And that's an interesting piece. But like when you find out you don't have any idea what you're doing, you're going to start making up your own systems and processes and rules. And you're going to start to, and I think so many of us have not been modeled well what it looks like to say the most important thing is spiritual health. And if it is the most important thing, then it changes everything about everything that we do. Right. So,
Yeah.
So it's like you got a great baseball. I mean, the stories we hear, right? You got a great baseball career, football career, but they want you to play on Sunday. Well, which is it? Right? You're going to get great grades, or your son tells you he's leading a small group. Which one? What makes your heart jump? Right? And I think like so much of that can cause some healthy introspection for us men to say, if eternity if our eyes are on eternity, and that goals and objectives are on the spiritual growth of our children, and for them to, continually be discipling, making disciples, right? I think we ought to be thinking about then how we talk, how we incentivize, what we act like matters, right? Because I'm telling you, I think there's just this natural rut of society and culture that makes us rut to the things that aren't eternal. And so it's like all of a sudden we can wake up and realize, oh my gosh, I'm incentivizing a bunch of things that aren't. Now, again, if you incentivize both, no problem. You want your kid to be academically great and spiritually healthy. But if academics becomes the main thing that is the main thing in their life, and we because what do they say, right? There's more caught than taught. I love that phrase because it's just like if we keep saying spiritual matters, but our incentivization and our motivation and our yelling or frustration or all that pours out over things that really aren't the main thing. I think that it's probably a healthy introspection moment for us to be reanalyzing how we drive faith.
How do you incentivize in a way that doesn't only incentivize the action and performance, but incentivizes the heart? Because what it sounds like is you can incentivize, don't get cavities until 18, but the why is, well, I get $1,000, so I'm gonna do it. And as a parent, you're kind of like, well, I like that you didn't get cavity. But with spiritual stuff, and maybe even some of the academic, you want the why, you want the motive to be my identity in Christ, or because I care for this family. And how do you create an incentive system that incentivizes without changing motive?
Yeah. Our incentive system by the way, I think it's going to be funny. People will forget everything we talked about on this, and they'll have a cavity incentive in many houses after this.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, does it apply to people outside of your household?
No, but it did work. I'll tell you that. I graduated a bunch of them with no cavities. So, I think you're, so this, I'm going to relate to something that Tebow told me back in my time with him. And I think he actually ended up putting in one of his books, but in his house, he was not allowed to talk about things he did. It was let another's lips praise you, coming out of scripture. And so our reward system often is because someone else tells us about it. I am not big on spiritual reward-based things that my children tell me they did. I am real big when I find out from someone else. And we have everything in our house. I mean, one of the things that's in our house is so silly. But like, we'll gather together and we will honor one of the kids or my wife, and we'll just say they get a one clap. And literally in our house, we gather together. There's 7 of us, and we gather together in the house, and I explain what it was they did. We do one clap, right? I can't tell you what that means to the kids. Like the kids will be like, Dad, did you hear what Layla did? She deserves a one clap, right? And it's breeding this culture. What's a clap, right? But it's starting to show them that we are celebrating the things, and sometimes they are academic, and sometimes they're athletic, but those can't trump spiritual and faith and eternal. And so I think we combine the heart piece with, ideally, it comes from another human, right? Someone else talking about you. Timmy used to get, I think Timmy got $1. I think he gets $1 per compliment that comes unsolicited. And him and I talked one day about how like tempted he was to be like, hey, would you mind going and telling my dad? Like, so this is still like in all of our little wretched, black-hearted sinners, like we all kind of want to still, but like I think there's,
so they don't think I said anything.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Don't mention me. And so, but no, I mean, I think that's just a piece of how I can find myself just falling back in a societal rut. Because again, we want our kids to have all the opportunities with good grades and drive. I mean, they can have all the opportunities in the world, and we want them to have that. We just don't want them to have a tremendous amount of worldly success and miss heaven. And so,
yeah. Well, that's good. I love what you said about like your kids. I funny because I told my daughter too. I'm like, one day you're gonna look back and you're gonna be a mom, and your kid is gonna be giving you, the third degree, and you're gonna be like, man, I was such a pain in the butt to dad and mom. Like you're gonna think this.
correct.
That's coming for you. And I love the idea of thinking about those future generations that are coming down the line and wanting to provide in a way for them that their eternal security is taken care of, but also that their current joy is taken care of. That there is joy in the midst of trial. That there is joy in the midst of everyday life. That and I think as men, the spiritual provision that we provide is, to your point, of the utmost importance, and it's paramount. And incentives or not, that's what we need to be doing. And so I'm just grateful for you, man. And
I'm going to take another minute, Jeff. So they're just going to people are gonna have to hang with us for one more minute. Man, of the lessons I've learned of the things you just talked about, is so much of what we don't do as men is let our kids see the vulnerable moments. Like again, we, some people out there know I went through a hurricane loss where we lost a lot of stuff in 4 hours, and I could have just shown the kids one front, but like I let them see me work through it, good, bad, and ugly. Like I would discuss things with them during it so that they know, right? I mean, because we're not equipped. Like we assume we're not equipped to handle tragedy and loss, and like, how do I work through it? How do I process? And I think so many men were built in that don't show a tear, don't show vulnerability. Me too, by the way. My dad, I can get raised by a crier, right? And we're proud of that, right? And it's like, no, man, like can be tremendously destructive if the kid doesn't know how to process emotions and doesn't know how to work through something. And so I think for me, part of mine has just not been anything magical. It's just been letting them into vulnerable, intimate moments that most dads would be like, I'm gonna close the door for this. I'm like, no, we can talk through this. Ask me questions. Like, not in the moment. They sometimes just seeing me upset, man. I had to, explain to FEMA that day, and they watched me go through something that I would like to undo FEMA for. But like, I just think how many times we as men have been taught this, like, don't show it. And it's like, well, if we don't show it, how do they know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how do they know how good God is? I mean, I just had this conversation with my son the other day. I was like, my son, one of them feels called to be a pastor. And he's like, Dad, I feel like I'm giving up financial wealth in this world to be a pastor. And I'm like, well, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But I'm like, that's up to God. Because again, he's provider. He doesn't need traditional ways. He doesn't need salaries to be the only way. And I started telling him stories that he knew, by the way, he had been alive for, stories where even in my life, when I chose ministry, someone would show up at the door, and there's a whole long one, I can't do it too long, but like just show up at the door and give me something I couldn't have been able to afford if I wanted it back in the day. It said, here, it's yours. And to God's glory, my son's like, are you kidding? Like that happened? I'm like, son, you knew that. I mean, how many times there's a passage in scripture, right, that says the next generation knew not the Lord. Well, I blame the parents. If we continuously point to the way that God has been faithful in our life, if we continually point to the way he's been provider, if we continually show how he helps us through those things, then they've got a chance of knowing how to do it themselves. And I think so many times we've been taught to do the opposite. Don't show it. And I think it's just tremendously detrimental. So as you said that, Jeff, it just sprung into me how many times lately I've had to go against what I would have learned growing up to be like, I'll show him this so he has a fighting chance to know what to do.
Yeah. Well, even like You just reminded me, I grew up in a single mother household on government assistance and all of that. And so my mom couldn't hide the hardship. She couldn't hide anything from me. But because the fact that she couldn't hide it, I knew how difficult life was, which also helped me then obey and stay out of trouble because I understood
100%.
the gravity of what our family is dealing with. So making stupid decisions wasn't going to benefit everybody. So that window is pivotal for development of kids, for them to just have a window into like, oh, mom, that's hard.
Right. That's it.
That's good.
Well, I know you got to go. For those of you that are listening to this and not watching, you have missed out on, there is a gentleman that I think is trying to get into this meeting, and he's at the door. And like, it's been so distracting. So that's better. So I want to make sure this man gets in the door. So we're going to cut this off.
Can we watch him get in? Can we say bye and then just watch you open the door?
Yeah. The excitement.
Bro, I have loved this. I could talk to you forever. You're one of the most interesting people on the planet to me, man. I just love your perspective. I love your stories. Thanks for joining us and talking.
You guys are the best, and we'll free the captives now. They can all be in the office. So, thank you, guys.
God bless you, brother.
Y'all.
Have a good one.